The COVID-19 pandemic has shown it is not deterred by national borders, leaving close to 300,000 people dead so far. In the face of a global crisis, the need for international cooperation and solidarity is brought into sharp focus. A very good evening and a warm welcome to yet another edition of our daily COVID-19 update. I'm Denver Kisting. With me is sign language interpreter Maggie Kashina Munene. In tonight's program, we take a look at how international solidarity, or the lack thereof, impacted on the fight against the virus. To help us unpack this rather weighty topic, I'm joined in the studio by an esteemed panel of seasoned diplomats. Joining us this evening are High Commissioner William Whitehead, the High Commissioner from South Africa. Good evening, sir, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you to have us on your program. Yeah.
We're also joined by Ambassador Sideno Acosta from Cuba. Good evening, sir, and welcome.
Good evening. Thank you very much.
Last but not least, we're joined by Ambassador Zhang Yiming from China. Good evening, sir, and welcome.
Good evening, dear brother. Thank you for having me tonight.
Before we get into tonight's conversation, we'd also like to thank the My Namibia, My Country, My Pride campaign for very generously sponsoring the water for this evening's program. High Commissioner, let's please get right into it. It's now almost 5 months since the 31st of December 2019 when the virus emerged. Can we hear about the impact of the pandemic on countries represented this evening, particularly as far as South Africa is concerned?
Thank you very much, DK. As far as South Africa is concerned, when we first recognized the fact that we had the presence of COVID within our country, President Ramaphosa very soon undertook the decision to declare it a disaster, to put into place the mechanisms to ensure the fact that there was some control over the particular virus. Needless to say, because this pandemic is worldwide, and personally we found ourselves having to it came about as a result of us being part of the global community, in the sense that we could not avoid it because we trade with other countries. We are not an island unto ourselves. So some of the mechanisms involved lockdowns, which are still in place today. We were at lockdown 5. We are now at lockdown 4, with a view that probably at the beginning of June we would, on the basis of an assessment of the cabinet under the leadership of President Ramaphosa, then consider either holistically in terms of the country or selectively to go to either phase 3 with some of them. If we find a situation in which a particular area is particularly afflicted and there is the need to maintain the status or to revert back to the status of 5, that will be the case in order to save lives, because President Ramaphosa has emphasized the issue of life. So far, in general, we have about more than 12,000 cases. We have had about 208 deaths. We have recovery of over 4,000. That is indicative of the fact that, to some extent, we are succeeding in certain areas in terms of the flattening of the curve around the particular virus.
But the war against the virus for South Africa is far from over, Your Excellency.
Absolutely, absolutely. We envisage that figures will climb, especially during the winter season, July, leading up to September. It is anticipated that until September, August, some areas will actually experience an increase in numbers, and then from there we will plateau and eventually maybe probably decline. This, of course, would come about as a result of the cooperation of citizens. Citizens are the most important individuals that they can stick to health regulations, ensure that they do not move, listen to what government is actually proposing, And more importantly, we are also learning from countries like our brothers here from China, who have assisted us in terms of assistance in terms of PPEs, as an example, advice in terms of their own particular experience. And we think that as a result of international cooperation with the World Health Organization, that this pandemic will be overcome, not only as South Africans, but universally, because it's an international pandemic.
Thank you very much. I would like us to, at some stage, also just get into the lessons that the respective countries have learned thus far. Ambassador Acosta, what is the situation in Cuba relating to COVID-19?
Thank you very much to invite us this night here to explain about COVID-19 in our countries. In Cuba, we started from the very beginning of March with the two first people who was sick of COVID-19. Today, we have 1,810 people who is sick, but only 366 still having this disease. That means that the rest of the people has recovered. Only 79 people, unfortunately, die because of the COVID-19. We are working very hard in order to keep the people, to tell the people and to learn the people that it's very important, isolate, to keep inside the houses in order to try to isolate also the disease. We passed already the higher point of the disease. We started now to reduce the quantity. That means that we cannot relax because of the COVID-19 is less people sick at this time, but the government and the people they're working very hard in order to keep the control of the disease. Today, even every day in Cuba, we gave information about how many people we found, because we made a lot of tests, more than 2,000 tests every day to check who are the people who have this disease. Only today, 20 people were sick, the new ones.
New infections.
New infections. Today, 14 May. And that means that from the very beginning, we started for 2, 4, 5, even we got one day more than 58, 70. Now we are on 20. Yesterday was only 12. That means that we started to go down, but we keep all the measures in order to try to don't increase again the disease. But really, the pharmaceutical industry in Cuba is working also very hard in order to provide to all the hospitals where the people are, all the medicine that they need to keep and to have the intensive care in the hospital.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Ambassador Yiming, please talk to us about the situation in China.
Well, COVID-19 is an unknown virus come across of a sudden. China is the first country in the world which firstly discovered and reported this virus. I remember on December 27th last year, the Chinese authorities, we received the first infection report in Wuhan. And 1 week later, Chinese authority government, we shared information timely with WHO and some other relevant countries. Considering the seriousness of this deadly virus, so guided and led by President Xi Jinping, Chinese central government, we have taken a series of the unprecedented measures to control and prevent the spreading of this virus. So in China, you have noticed that in the past 3 months, the Chinese people, we united together. Although we suffered greatly, both socially and economically, but we finally, we are successful to contain the spreading of this virus within the shortest period of time in 3 months. So I want to say that this virus poses not only a challenge to the the governance of Chinese government, but also it's a serious challenge to safeguarding the Chinese people's safety and health. But we we are confident that now through these most comprehensive, most restricted, and most thorough measures that are taken by Chinese government, now the internal or domestic transmission has been basically cut off. And 99% of the economic activities has been restored. And from 1st of June, next month, the entire China's, we will restore, open the new semesters, both primary schools, secondary schools. So this means that through solidarity, through strong leadership, and scientifically, we are able to contain and to defeat this virus.
Thank you. While you have the floor, Ambassador, just very briefly, seeing that you're based in Namibia,
Yes.
what is your take on the Namibian government's approach in containing the further spread of COVID-19 here in Namibia?
From the very beginning, once we received the report of this pandemic, Chinese government, we immediately shared all necessary information with all the countries in the world, including African friends and including Namibia, just to send the warning message to be prepared. So I have to say that since March, the first case, infection case confirmed in Namibia, Namibian government, leadership, the president has taken excellent, very much effective precautions. So we can see in the past over 1 month, no more new cases reported in Namibia, which demonstrate that these precautions taken by our government has been effective. And the promotions regarding the information about this COVID-19 among the Namibians, I think that, in my view, also is very much efficient. So all in all, I think international collaboration, cooperation, solidarity, unity also is very vital, because this virus is threatened the entire world. So any country can be able to defeat this virus by themselves, but any single country could be left behind to form a coalition together to defeat this virus. That's why I think tonight this panel is very important. The topic we are discussing, international solidarity, is really, really necessary and vital.
Thank you.
For both of us.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Acosta, can you also, from your perspective, touch on the importance of international solidarity in fighting a common enemy such as COVID-19?
Okay. Cuba started to cooperate with all the country from the very beginning of the disease. Even we send doctors to China to learn how and to work also to cooperate with China to take care of the people of Cuba was at that time in China. And also we received the country, 25 countries asked to Cuba to cooperate with them, with the medical doctors, to fight against COVID. At this time, we have, as I said, 25 brigades working in different countries. In Africa, we have 4 already, apart from those 58 cooperation countries where we have Cuban doctors working already. Not only for COVID, we have in 4 countries. That means in Togo, we have in Cape Verde, we have in Angola, and we have also in South Africa cooperation only for COVID. That started after the request of the countries to Cuba to cooperate with them in order to fight COVID-19. I thought today with somebody that we have to remember for this time for COVID-19, something that the former President Fidel Castro said one day when the neoliberalism arrived in the world, that the globalization was arriving in everywhere in the world, that also we have to globalize the solidarity. We have also globalized the cooperation. And this is the time to keep this globalization for solidarity, for cooperation, to fight the COVID-19. Cuba is working very hard with many countries to help them to fight the COVID-19. Also, South Africa, China, and many others also are helping us to fight against COVID-19 because we have an economy very poor. We are a country that we have already blockade, economical and financial blockade against Cuba, and we cannot access free to all the market and to buy medicine, to buy equipment for our hospital, and hopefully we have friends. And this is something that we always very grateful for us, that the Cuban is very happy to cooperate in this fighting against COVID-19.
High Commissioner, before I gauge your take on the concept of global solidarity that the ambassador shared with us, we're just going to take an insert very quickly. The concept of international solidarity stretches to all scopes and fraternities across the world. Next is a short extract by the Pope, who recently called for economic sanctions to be lifted. Let's take a listen.
In considerazione delle circostanze, si allettino pure le sanzioni internazionali che inibiscono la possibilità dei paesi che ne sono destinatari di fornire adeguato sostegno ai propri cittadini e si mettano in condizioni tutti gli Stati di far fronte alle maggiori necessità del momento, riducendo, se non addirittura condonando, il debito che grava sui bilanci di quelli più poveri.
Very important message there from the Pope. High Commissioner, globalizing solidarity, globalizing cooperation. What do you make of the importance thereof amidst fighting a common enemy such as this pandemic?
No, thank you. First and foremost, just to follow up on my brother from Cuba's words in terms of some of the best practitioners of international solidarity, which is Cuba. I'm glad to also announce the fact that today the 207 Cuban doctors that had been quarantined and Cuba had assisted us with out of quarantine and are able to now get into the field and assist us in terms of their specialized skills. So a sense of great appreciation to the great Cuban people.
It's indeed a big day.
Yeah, it's indeed a big day, and it's fortunate that we're having this interview. But in terms of global solidarity, I think Fidel spoke about the issue of internationalism, because solidarity and internationalism are inseparable. The fact that individuals, people can, as the Cubans' example says, sacrifice their interest in the interests of others and in the interests of humanity. So this is the type of global solidarity that I think needs to emanate as a result of globalization, because everybody is everywhere, and the impact of this particular disease, of this pandemic, is felt in many different ways. It ranges across class, it ranges across race, it ranges across gender issues. So it presupposes that the fact that I am not affected by the coronavirus doesn't mean that it will not affect me tomorrow. That's the essence of it. So in terms of that, resources need to be put into the hands of humanity so that this disease be overcome. President Ramaphosa, as an example, in terms of international solidarity, was telling the G20 summit to say that, look, the area of the world that will be most affected are the developing countries, Africa in particular, and that we need to ensure the fact that a solidarity fund is then created to deal with this problem in Africa. That institutions such as the IMF would have to then waiver the issues of payment of loans that are made by the African countries. That the issues of sanctions imposed unfairly and unjustly on other countries, that should be superseded by an international campaign to be focused on dealing with the coronavirus. For once, let us forget everything else. Let us say globally, because we are all affected, let us put whatever resources, whether it be scientific, whether it be in the form of technology, whether it be in the form of human resources, whether it be in the form of providing food, that this international solidarity must crisscross. That in the end, we must then just say, this is humanity, and this, each of us must engage, must ensure that we endeavor in order, in whatever little way we can, in order to fight the disease. It is the only way in which, when we approach it universally and with global solidarity, that we can actually overcome the disease. There is nobody who's cleverer than the other now. It's an issue of saying, what is it that I can contribute towards global solidarity to ensure that mankind, in a sense, is not so adversely affected?
But Your Excellency, with respect, you're saying as we are united in our humanity in the fight against the common enemy, we need to forget about everything else, including some of our debt. But would that not, particularly as far as Africa is concerned, increase our dependability on aid?
Now, when we are talking about that, clearly, I mean, the international institutions in terms from whom we lend at this particular day, you are arriving at a situation in which countries will just not be able to pay.
Even if they want to?
Even if they want to. That is the type of crisis that is left. In Africa, we are facing potentially a situation in which 20 million people will remain unemployed. Institutions breaking down. States with poor capacity being unable, whose main focus now is on the issue of COVID, being unable to actually deal with issues of debt. Whereas we are struggling with health systems, you know, we are trying to mitigate the particular virus and the crisis. It is an economic crisis. So whether in the end it becomes an issue of whether you really want to or you don't want to, you are faced with the reality where I, with my hands up, say that, look, I'm unable to meet debt repayment currently.
Thank you, Excellency. Thank you very much. If you want to participate in tonight's conversation, if you have a question for one of the seasoned diplomats, the number to dial is 061-291-3339. 061-291-3339. Please remember to switch off your television set or your radio to avoid any confusion, and also bear in mind that there's one common enemy, and it's called COVID-19. So we are here to build and be constructive around finding solutions to firstly contain the further spread of the pandemic across the globe, but also to save lives and save economies. Ambassador Acosta, what do you make, and you touched on it earlier, but you know, what the Pope also referred to in his brief address, calling for sanctions to be lifted as soon as possible.
Yeah. Cuba has been for near 60 years in a living in a blockade from the United States. Blockade that is not only is economic, financial, and also commercial. That means that many people cannot commercialize anything with Cuba. And we cannot go directly to the United States to buy many things that we need for our economy. Even they try to suffocate our economy, killing us. Even we cannot take any ship to bring oil to Cuba because this ship will be sanctioned by the United States. That means that it's very hard We cannot use the dollar for our transaction, international transaction. We have to use other money, other currency, but today is only the bank knowing that some money is going to Cuba, they stop it, they blockade it. It's only because it's going to Cuba. That means that the blockade for us is very hard. The government of Cuba is working to keep what the resources we have in order to fight COVID-19 and to try to everybody is protected by the government of Cuba, even if those sanctions are still alive. Let me tell you that for more than 25 years, we are fighting in the United Nations in order to lift the blockade against Cuba. Time by time, more countries stay against this blockade. But now the Pope, as he said, it's important, even in this time of COVID-19, to lift the sanctions. We are agree also for that, even to help us to fight COVID-19. But no, nothing happened. Everything is still like that. Even it's worsened, it's strengthened. The government of the United States is reinforcing this blockade. That means that because of the international solidarity, because of this international cooperation, because of those friends that Cuba got for all over those years before, we can count, we can have the resources, at least the minimum that we can have to fight against COVID-19. Because it's not only for us to fight COVID, it's also because we have to give food for the world population of Cuba, for more than 11 million people in our country. And it's medicine for COVID, but also it's medicine for the ones that have another kind of disease.
So what do you think are the chances of that call by the Pope, that call by Cuba to be heeded, to be answered, for those sanctions, for the blockades to be lifted?
Yes, the Pope says that.
Do you think it might happen, it will happen, it could happen?
I don't think so. In this time, those measures have no intent. There is no intentions to leave it.
Ambassador Yiming, this is a very sensitive and a very loaded topic, of course. But what do you make, having heard your counterparts from Cuba and South Africa, concurring with the Pope calling for sanctions to be lifted amidst this pandemic?
Well, regarding the Cuba issue, China's standing position is persistent and clear, that we firmly oppose any country to impose unilateral sanctions on any other countries in the world based on their so-called domestic law or regulations. Like my colleagues, the Cuban ambassador, rightly pointed out that unfortunately, Cuba has been blockaded by the United States for more than 60 years. And these sanctions is a unilateral sanctions, which has caused great the economic and social impact on the normal life of the Cuban people. I have been to Cuba several times. I've seen it with my own eyes. In our view, this kind of sanctions is useless. It doesn't have to improve the living normal life of the majority of the Cuban people, and it's unfair. So China, together with most of the international community member states, we keep appealing to the relevant country and the UN General Assembly to cancel, lift these sanctions on Cuba.
But nothing comes of these appeals to the relevant country, as you put it. What purpose does it serve to keep on appealing to the relevant country, but nothing happens? And Ambassador Acosta says his fear is that nothing will happen even amidst this crisis.
Well, it's true. Now, against the current pandemic situation, we have now the humanitarian assistance to Cuba is so difficult to arrive there. Like Chinese billionaire Jack Ma, he has made his personal donations through one U.S. companies, but finally they refused because of these unilateral sanctions posed by the American government. So it's against the spirit of the internationalism and the humanitarianism. So China, I think we will keep calling. I think that this is the justice. We must insist on the basic principles of the justice. So we have the full sympathy on the Cuba and the Cuban people, and we will join hands together to try our best to change this scenario as soon as possible.
If you want to contribute, just one moment, Your Excellency. If you want to contribute to tonight's conversation about international solidarity and cooperation, 061-291-3339. 061-291-3339. Yes, Your Excellency.
Yeah. No, I just thought that I must comment on what my colleagues are saying. I think, the chief characteristic problem in relationship to the sanctions that unilaterally applied on a country is also linked to the world system, whereby certain superpowers are able to then take unilateral decisions. That is why we are calling for greater emphasis on multilateralism. The issues of the coronavirus will only be resolved as a result of multilateralism.
Why do you say that?
Well, because it is clear that in situations in which we've cooperated at a multilateral level, that we have been able to actually resolve problems. Consider the expertise and the experience that Cuba has in relationship to the primary health care system, where when it comes to the issues of public health, they are considered, even by those who don't like them, to have the best fundamentals in place that we as South Africa, as an example, are also learning from, which many countries, they have sent expertise to Italy. So one was very encouraged during the Obama administration to the effect that there were moves made in order to remove sanctions from Cuba. And mind you, it was not because it was a favor. It was on the basis of an understanding that Cuba is contributing so much multilaterally and can contribute much more. The very same principle applies to the question of the application of sanctions against Iran, where, for instance, the JCPOA was put into place and the Obama administration negotiated this also in recognition of the expertise that they could bring onto the table. So the issue of a world order in which unilateralism applies is a dying world order. Because coronavirus, as an example, proves to us that some of the richest countries in the world are unable to resolve this problem on their own, that they require the cooperation of other countries, whether it be at a scientific, technological level. They cannot do it on their own.
Despite that reality, they don't seem to embrace the concept of multilateralism and how it could aid them in their fight against the pandemic. Why is that?
I think it emanates from the thinking that, I mean, it's expressed quite tacitly now, by certain countries, this narrow nationalistic approach towards problems. This, I think, we will do it on our own. This attitude to say, we do not need those. It emanates from that concept. It emanates also on the basis of the world economic system right now, in which capitalism dominates as a system, whereby, the issue of a collective effort has given, once again, in situations like this, I mean, if we say at the end of the COVID crisis, already people are picking and saying, if we find a virus, countries individually, some of them are pursuing the issue of a vaccine. in the end, it must be said that that particular country is the one that will put a vaccine. Who are the ones that are going to benefit out of that vaccine?
Your Excellency, let's just park that thought for a moment. We've got Romano from Karasburg on the line. Good evening. Good evening, Romano. Hello. Romano, can you hear us?
Yes.
We can finally hear you too. Good evening.
Yes, good evening.
Yes.
I just wanted to give a shout out to the South African government for the contribution that they've did to the United Nations, European Union, that they've pledged money to the fight to get a vaccine for COVID-19. That just show the solidarity and the connections that the countries have to get a vaccine for COVID-19.
Very well. Thank you very much, Romano.
Okay, thank you very much.
Karasburg is very close to South Africa, Your Excellency.
Yes.
Yes, it makes sense. Ambassador Yiming, I'd like to gauge your take on what our Commissioner was just saying about the sanctions in particular and what the underlying reasons, according to him, could be. What do you make of that?
Well, I want to back to the topic you mentioned from the very beginning, the main theme of tonight's discussion, international solidarity. I want to emphasize two words. The first word is internationalism. The second word is the multilateralism. I fully agree with my two colleagues, their comments, that this virus poses a serious challenge to all the international communities. And no any single country are able to defeat this virus. So we must unite together because we share this only one planet, one Earth. We are living in one global village. And the virus respects no borders, respects no nationalities. And from this pandemic, which demonstrates that urgency and importance to strengthen the international solidarity cooperation to improve the global public health system, which Africa continent is one of the most weakest points. So from this point of view, China, together with the other countries, including Cuba, we have demonstrated the spirit of the humanitarianism and the internationalism. You can see China, we are one of the most affected country by this virus, but we still try our best to offer our assistance, both materially and technical know-how to the entire world. We have provided the anti-pandemic materials to more than 150 countries and regions in the world, including Namibia and South Africa. The Chinese companies, private charity foundations, they all join hands together. So I would like to appreciate, for instance, like the Cuban government to dispatch the Cuban doctors to South Africa. This demonstrates the spirit of internationalism. This demonstrates the humanitarianism. So no country, we have a mercy. We should consider those countries which still under some unilateral sanctions, which are not able to receive the humanitarian assistance from other countries. That's why we are appealing to some countries to consider to lift the sanctions as soon as possible. Another word is this multilateralism. Because of this pandemic, now we fully understand the importance that we must unite together. And mankind, we have to choose the confidence over panic.
Thank you, Ambassador. We've got Joseph from Okahanya on the line. Good evening, sir. Good evening, Joseph.
Good evening. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you. Under the new normal circumstances, how are you?
I'm doing fine, sir. I've got two questions there.
Yes.
The first question is to the ambassador of China. And we hear that, and then we all know that the disease is starting in China. And the Chinese, they have managed to control these diseases. So my question is only the quarantine, they are quarantining people, or they've got a medicine that they're using for them to control this disease. Because we have seen that in China, they have really reduced these diseases. So this is the first question to the ambassador of China. So I want to know what they're using. Is it to quarantine people, to advise people to stay at home, or there is certain medicine that they're using that are helping people?
Thanks.
That
Your
is
second
one.
question, please.
Then another question is to the ambassador of South Africa. They're talking about solidarity. Him as a leader, but can you explain what solidarity that we have among the African countries? Because up to now, we have seen that there is a medicine from Madagascar, but there is many opposition. So we have seen that it's an African country. In Madagascar, they are reducing these diseases from this medicine. And then we have seen also in Senegal. So can you explain as a leader, because we don't hear the cooperation between the African countries.
Joseph, thank you very much for your questions. Joseph, thank you very much for your questions.
Thank you very much, sir.
Ambassador, you first.
Well, it's a good question. For China, as a big country with 1.4 billion people, it's really a serious challenge for Chinese government to contain and to control the spreading of the coronavirus within the shortest period of time, as much as we can. But why China, we are able to cut off the internal transmission at time being? I think we have some key elements. Firstly, the central government, we have established the joint commanding and preventing system. Secondly, this system enables Chinese government to mobilize our national resources to support the epicenter, Wuhan city, which is a city with 1.11 million population, to lock down for nearly 80 days. 80 days. We seal off the border. We try every possible means to save lives, and we promote the basic knowledge among the Chinese people to know the danger of this virus. So through these combined measures, of course, our scientists are racing with the time to develop the effective vaccines and the medicines to cure the patients. And we rely, the Chinese authorities also conducted the testing, the test to the people who are most needed, one by one, even in Wuhan, because now, as we know, 2 days ago there are new reported infections. So it's alerted us we cannot be relaxed. So now we decide to test the Wuhan people, residents, one by one. 11 million. It's not an easy job to do, but
how long is that project expected to take?
Well, they have two kinds of the testing kits. One is a nucleic acid test. But it's very easy, but it will cost 6 hours before you know the outcome. It must be proved from the lab. And one person must receive twice testing before you prove you are positive, you're negative. You are free to go anywhere, and they will issue you a green code. In your mobile phone. Then you are free to move anywhere inside China.
But Ambassador, just to conclude, how long is it expected to take to test the 11 million people in Wuhan?
Well, that's a good question. I think hopefully within 1 month. Now the municipality government of the Wuhan is trying every possible means to mobilize the neighborhood committee throughout the city, and to voluntarily to respond to the requirement of the government to take the test.
Commissioner, I'll give you a time to respond in a moment. Petrina from Angola, good evening.
Good day, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm all right. My point is just to sincere my sympathy to the government, to USA, the government of Cuba. I heard they are saying they have the sanction that has been there for 60 years, and as of COVID, they are not able to get the assistance.
Thank you.
So we hope American government will understand so that our brother and sister, they can also get assistance for the future.
Thank you very much.
Mm.
Very kind of you. High Commissioner.
Yes, I think that was a very relevant and good question. And I hope the viewer can assist all of us in ensuring that that question is a question that we daily ask each other as Africans in relationship to the fact that Madagascar today is saying it has a solution. But because it has not been subject to tests by certain institutions, it therefore decries from the fact that it could be a herbal remedy. Just as we have many other herbal remedies. I'm glad that Nigeria, for instance, has placed an order in relationship to that. Because it again points to the issue that that which we invent, unless somebody who has previously been a master or something like that and says, okay, that is good enough for you. You don't think it's good enough for yourself. I think we as Africans have a problem around that. I am therefore not suggesting that whatever remedy can be put on the table should not be subject to scientific examination.
Why can't we then do it and allay all these fears, all these concerns?
We do have the capacity and the capability of doing that. But the constraints in certain instances, and I'm so glad about the Madagascar president saying, we go ahead, we know it has been proved. Madagascar has said we only have 108 cases. We haven't followed the process to say how far is Madagascar. So home-brewn examples are things that we do not take as Africans. So in terms of that, this is where the issues of solidarity amongst each other is therefore lacking. And I think President Ramaphosa is insisting on saying, for instance, that we need to have a COVID-19 a fund in which we would cooperate with each other. And charity begins at home. Here, for instance, South Africa, Namibia, in the SADC region, this is immediately something that the SADC Secretariat, as an example, should be taking up, because already at the regional level, we are talking about cooperation. Last week, the president, together with President Gingwab and other regional leaders, met to discuss a common approach in relationship to the COVID issues. And within the SADC context, this issue of this particular herbal remedy is something that we should examine, because after all, if it works, it is a cheaper means of overcoming or at least restraining the particular virus.
Thank you so much, High Commissioner. Ambassador Yiming, we've run out of time, unfortunately. So in conclusion, how do you see the concept of multilateralism being embraced, especially post-COVID-19, because it shouldn't end here?
Thank you. Multilateralism, in my view, it means the community of the shared future for mankind, which initiated by my president, Xi Jinping, 7 years ago, because we share only one planet, one Earth. So we should support each other against this spreading of the pandemic. The international community should work together instead of pointing fingers to criticizing each other or to shift the blame to others or to stigmatizing other countries, which doesn't help for the international solidarity. So China, as the long-standing all-weather friend of Namibia, of Africa, we will remain your reliable friend and partner.
Thank you.
And we will try our best to keep supporting our African brothers and sisters to increase,
Thank you.
strengthen the capacity building to contain or to defeat this deadly virus.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Acosta, your final remarks, please.
Yeah. Cuba started to work with Africa for a long time ago now. That means that for us, from the very beginning, was to respond for the cooperation for those countries who asked to come here to help for the liberation of those countries, to keep the independence against the colonialism. Now is not the time to fight against colonialism. It's the time to fight against the subdevelopment. And now, in this precise it's the time to fight against COVID-19. And the cooperation also, South-South cooperation also is very, very important because it's the cooperation that those countries that don't have too much resource to fight against this disease or this underdevelopment in the country, is the experience of everybody is good to have it. Cuba is in the position today to say something.
Thank you.
To all the countries that support Cuba against this blockade, even Namibia. Also, he always has been with us in United Nations, in African Union. 100% of the countries of Africa cooperate with Cuba to avoid to lift the blockade.
Thank you,
but
Ambassador.
at this time, Cuba is in the position to continue cooperating with all over the world.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you very much. High Commissioner, South Africa tonight has the final word.
Yeah. I would really say the demonstration, the fact that there's 3 ambassadors, we are here together, is a semblance of already existing cooperation at various levels. And I think it's important to be reminded of the African saying, and this for me epitomizes solidarity and cooperation, is the fact that we say, when your neighbor's house is on fire, you don't beat the tom-tom. You take water and you prevent it from burning out. So as far as we are concerned, the greatest contribution we can make to humanity is in terms of stretching ourselves a little bit more in the interest of humanity. And to say that the world must strengthen multilateral cooperation and isolate unilateral behavior.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for sharing your expertise. Let's continue the good fight against COVID-19.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Health workers have long realized the need for international solidarity. We hope that the world listens to them in the face of COVID-19. From all of us here at the NBC COVID-19 Update Desk, it's good night and goodbye.